Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Starting a Counseling Practice podcast, where we share amazing journeys of therapists from all over the world and the things that went well and the things that were a little sticky or confusing. And today we have Jamey with us. Jamey is a psychoanalyst and therapist in New York State. And they're going to share their story of becoming a therapist as a second career today and then starting a private practice. Jamey, will you introduce yourself, share your domain name for anybody who wants to go and stalk you while they're listening to this, and then a little bit about your specialties.
Sure. Thanks, Miranda. I'm Jamey Adam Hecht, PhD, PsyD, LMFT, and my website is www.drjameyhecht.com. It's a strange spelling because I was born in 1968 when everything was up in the air. And I was a professor of literature before I became a mental health professional. And I was really into teaching and was obsessed with the humanities and got very deep into it and memorized hundreds of lines of poetry and felt that that was the key to a life well lived, and that all the wisdom necessary to solve the problems of life could be found in the great books of the ages across the world and the centuries. That turned out not to be quite true, but it still seems to me that it adds a tremendous richness to the mental health journey, and that much of what we do actually has its roots in Shakespeare and Sophocles and other great poets and storytellers and thinkers who have tried to come to grips with the human condition among people who walked the earth before us. So it's a mix now, what I do.
Humans have been humaning for a really long time. And they've been trying to understand that experience through connection and through art for a really long time. Tell me, I'm so curious about if you could describe in like a minute or less, why did you decide, right, after all those years in the humanities, to pursue becoming a therapist, an analyst, an LMFT? What was that like turning point for you?
One answer has to do with why making a living as a humanities professor became more or less impractical in the United States at the historical moment in which I was doing it. But the more interesting part is, why did I choose to become a therapist? Humanities is in a state of disarray. Nobody can agree which books are worth teaching or what teaching is, what the goals of education are. Some of the great statements over the past, say, century and a half of what it's about have been found to be inadequate for various reasons, I think good and bad. And the thing hasn't really cooked down, as it were, into some resolution that will give people direction as to why they pay to study, why they give it 4 years of their lives, why they might devote their whole lives to joining a faculty. And faculty aren't very well paid at this point either. There's a whole lot of administrators whose job is to assess, and they are pretty obsessed with assessing things. And as in mental health, sometimes the top-down organization of things in a neoliberal arrangement puts too much emphasis on spending time filling out assessments of what you do rather than actually doing it. And for those financial reasons and professional reasons and so on, it gradually became clear to me that this dream, which had formerly organized my entire personality and my view of what I was going to do with my life, had to change. I floundered for a while, really could not figure out how to replace teaching, which I really loved doing. And it was very painful for a while, not least because at this point, I was a man in my 40s. And I'm sure a person of any gender would be in some degree of difficulty being an apprentice again in early midlife. But from my perspective, at any rate, there were elements of masculinity that made that more difficult. I want to feel that the person in the mirror has some power to affect the world. I'm no Jungian. I'm partial to Freud myself and a number of other thinkers too. But it does occur to me that there's a tarot card, I happen to have it right here, called the Knight of Wands, where you can see this fellow is riding into the world to have some sort of effect on it, wielding an instrument and so on. And you don't have to be Freud or Jung to figure that one out, but it was pretty challenging, to be 40 something and trying to get it together as an intern. But with some support from my family and people near and dear to me, and some degree of misfortune, which I weathered, I was able to get a license as a marriage and family therapist and a PsyD in psychoanalysis.
The question that I never heard in there, why therapy in particular?
Yeah. One piece is part of what I loved about teaching was meeting students and fairly quickly inferring an impression of what it was they were really dealing with, what was impinging on them most in their lives, that was really getting in there and messing with their equilibrium, pushing them to the limits of what they already knew how to do, what they already knew how to cope with, into a zone of proximal development, to quote Lev Vygotsky, the educational psychologist, where there was stuff they could deal with help, but not without help. Often these were existential anxieties of precisely the sort that therapists and psychoanalysts can be found helping people with. And the other reason was that I was in the business of interpreting texts, making meanings out of things that I was confronted with. And as a therapist, the text is what the patient is saying. Now, that can sound cold, as if I'm turning a person into a book, but the word text here is really stretchy. And it includes what it's like in your heart to sit with another human being and gather in an impression of what is going on inside them. A lot of that is verbal and a lot of it isn't.
It's so interesting. Again, having this conversation from that literature perspective, or even you brought up, I realized you brought up the tarot, right, card and showed it, but there are people listening to this on the podcast that didn't get to see that visually. But even that idea of like seeing a card and not running to a book to figure out what that card means, but like sitting with the impression of what emotions come up, or not necessarily sometimes picking apart the text or the poem, but really just sitting with what is the emotion or what is the thing that you are drawn to or repulsed from, right? So that really interesting. Yeah, it's a fun little space. And I've often one of the things I've found even in my personal life really interesting, which is when somebody goes, oh my gosh, that person's an a-hole, they're a jerk. I don't know what the F their problem is. People get really angry. And I always try to remember if I knew their story, if I knew their backstory, their behavior usually like really makes sense, right? That compassionate part. And so just thinking about all those pieces of you getting to move from unpacking stories from authors of old and from fictional characters to now unpacking less fictional characters.
Yeah. I love what you said about that. Putting yourself in the presence of a poem or a person or a story about somebody and seeing what draws you in and what pushes you away. And the thing you said right after that brings up for me the very important distinction between explanation and excuse. And I've got a blog post on my website. There's a blog on it that I write. There's no AI on the thing. And I deal with all kinds of different subjects there. But one of them is called If You Could Have Done Better, You Would Have. And it says, you don't know how much free will you've got until later. So in the present, operate as though you had plenty. Then in the rearview mirror, it will show you, you'll figure out what the constraints were that limited your expression of your energy and opportunities and so on. But don't assume that it's constrained already now in some hidden way. Do the best you can, and you'll figure out, oh, had I known, had I been more healed and less injured, had I had better supports, had I understood myself more, had I been more connected to the past or to the globe and its peoples or to my extended family, had I understood my friends better, if I had a bigger relational skill set, if I had a broader repertoire of conversations, then I would have done it differently. But I must have compassion for this person I was 14 months ago, 14 years ago, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the people that hurt you. You can explain it, and that's not letting them off the hook. You deserve an explanation.
Yeah. Woo, such a juicy conversation. But I know people here also want to hear more about why did you decide to go into private practice in particular?
Okay, thanks. As an intern, I worked at an agency for a while. I was briefly a school psychologist for one academic year at a K through 12. But the main thing I did as an intern, this was in Los Angeles. I'm in private practice in Brooklyn, New York, but during my training, I was in LA, was at a place called the Relational Center, which is a remarkable and unique community mental health and wellness center, founded by a very bright guy with a great sense of mission named Mark Fairfield. And their slogan is, isolation hurts, we help. So they run all sorts of groups in addition to the individual therapy that they offer, which is on a sliding scale. And the groups practice radical inclusion, and they're focused on all sorts of different identities, but also different life problems that people deal with. Disordered eating, work compulsion. There's no liquid called workahol, but people failure to launch, the rest slipped my mind now, but that was the kind of way that it was organized. And they had some supervisors who were really seasoned people who would come in and hold group supervision. And all in all, it was a very valuable experience to intern. And I was licensed in June of 2016 as an MFT. I started the process by going to grad school. I did the master's in clinical psych at Antioch, LA. Began it in 2010, finished in 2012. That was when I started seeing patients as an intern. And 4 years after that, in 2016, I got the license. But around the time I started that, I think 2011, I started psychoanalytic training at NCP, the new Center for Psychoanalysis in Los Angeles. That took a while, finished that in July of 2019. For the first few years of my work as a therapist, I accepted insurance from four big major insurance companies. I learned a lot. I read the standard book. I can see the woman's face in my mind, and I think I have her name right. That's the one, Navigating the Insurance Maze.
Yeah.
And that was extremely illuminating. Of course, if your mind is tuned to this sort of thing and you've got that flair for it, it can all be very stimulating. For me, a person coming out of the poetry world, it was dry as dust. And I've got plenty of ADD, and I was daunted by this and felt, oh, I shall never understand it. But largely through business school, nothing helped me nearly as much as taking the Zenime business bootcamp for therapists. It got me over my anxiety and managed to come to grips with it. But taking insurance was very challenging. You pocket the copay right away, or the coinsurance, then you send in paperwork to get the remainder of the allowed amount, and the insurance company collects the rest. And it isn't unfair because they're providing you with a continuous stream of clients. And if you're a fairly early career, that is a beautiful thing, provided that you understand what you're getting into. And then there comes, I think, an inflection point eventually, who knows quite how far down the line, where it's appropriate to ask yourself, am I still doing this because I'm in this deep groove and I'm comfortable with it, and I lack the confidence to take on the necessary risks and see if I can do this myself? Or am I doing it because I genuinely prefer this business model and it suits me? I found, nope, this was training wheels. This was the on-ramp. Get me out of this thing. So I did.
Well, and I could imagine too, having worked with therapists all over the country and all over the world, I've always really been struck by the fact that insurance reimbursements are seldom connected at all to the cost of living in a particular place. It really has more to do with the amount of therapists that are available and that will say yes to particular contracts. And so I've found in particular in Los Angeles, the reimbursement rates compared to the cost of living seem very out of out of whack with many of the insurance companies. And so it's I think there's the personality part for me being definitely on the I'm very much on the ADHD spectrum. I can manage paperwork and organization to a point, but sitting on the phone for, when things come up or there's denials or navigating busy work is not where I shine. And I found that for the most part, it really pulled me away from enjoying the clinical work. And really, I never had an issue with enjoying my clinical work. And I very much more enjoyed more of the marketing and blogging and connecting. And again, like you said, for some people, they're like, no, I like the logistics of navigating the insurance maze and figuring this out and having this steady stream of clients and not having to maybe market. Again, in some cases, people still have to market, but not having to market in that case versus like, oh no, I'd much rather market and just know that I'm getting paid in this moment and moving forward, through this process. So let's talk about how private practice went for you last year. I know that one of the things I'm hearing from people a lot right now is, so it's a question that's getting asked is like, is private practice dead? I should have started private practice, 10 years ago, but private practice is dead and no one's making money in private practice. And you happened to give me a few numbers before we got started. So I know that's not the case for you, but what have you been experiencing in kind of real life in terms of being able to make money in this profession as someone who left a profession partially because it was not financially viable?
That's surprising to me that people are saying private practice is dead. It's like finding out, painting is dead or poetry is dead. Surely somebody is composing a poem somewhere, there's a person with a paintbrush in her hand looking at a canvas is making a picture despite all the talk about it being supposedly dead and gone and over with. It still happens. Somebody is always doing good work somewhere, no matter how adverse the conditions. Someone is teaching children in wholesome fashion information that connects them to the past, to other people, that tells them what you can expect from others and what you can't, what you should not put up with, what people can offer each other, how long to stay involved in an activity before you go consult with someone else, how to sing a song, how to talk to strangers, how to have good boundaries. Somebody is teaching adolescents in an appropriate, skilled, robust way. Somebody is counseling people about how to date how to be a good boyfriend. I've told many clients, husbanding is an Olympic sport. Go for the gold. Get into it. It'll be way less of a pain in the ass if you're really interested in mastering this thing as a skill set. Someone is always teaching well, someone's always doing therapy in a role appropriate, competent way that's gratifying, grounded, oriented, geared to the client, no matter what the conditions are. Imperial Rome, the empire collapses, all the institutions are in ruins, it's a smoking mess across Europe. And little village organizations crop up to get people fed, to get people nursed when they're ill, to get people clothed, to distribute seeds so people have what to plant. There might not be a name to it, but this person over here with the guts to do it, she's doing it. And that's who people go to.
Tell your story, James. How was practice for you last year?
Okay. I told you I had ADD. You were warned.
Oh, I love it.
It
Oh,
was very
one quick second. I'm kind of laughing. Um, Alexa, stop.
mine heard that.
Go ahead, James. Sorry about that, Jamey.
I did quite well. I had some sliding scale patients here in Brooklyn who would come to the office. I had some sliding scale patients in California. I'm also licensed in New Jersey and in Texas. Most of my patients were full fee. I charged $250, and I have not raised my fee since, I think, 2018. It's 7 years already. And the economy has waxed and waned several times. Right now, it looks like it's in a pretty big contraction. Nobody knows how far that's going to go. Some of the people I confer with have said, "Oh, you should raise your fee." Maybe my reluctance to do that has to do with, old-fashioned hesitation about the confidence to value my service. I don't think so. I think this is an accurate assessment of what the market will bear, and I don't want therapy to be a hardship as an expense. I do have a sliding scale. I don't overuse it, but I've always got a few people who are paying less and even markedly less. But there's always a reason for that. And I made a good living.
Mm. Yeah. I think that's the piece that, like, I always want people to go back to is like, am I doing something that's sustainable for me? Am I doing something that really works for me and my clientele? And can we get out of this space of judging our own fee or judging anyone else's fee and know that we have done our own math to figure out what is workable in terms of how many clients that we can see and do really good work with, that we know how many sliding scale slots we can have and feel really good about them and not feel any sense of obligation or resentment towards that person, so that they're getting the same level of like care and delight as anyone who's paying your full fee, that everybody gets the same or the same version of Jamey, maybe not like the right version of Jamey, right? Maybe it's not exactly the same, right? Sometimes we, as we're tuning to our clients, but the right and really present version of us, of you, and that space of being able to like navigate in such a way the decisions where you go, yeah, I'm okay. I don't feel like I have to be in a panic attack. I don't feel like I have to leave the profession. Even that space of knowing like, oh, I was able to really, like, people said I should raise my rates. I looked at it and I went, no, I'm good. Yeah. And knowing exactly why you made that decision, and knowing that I think the sovereignty sometimes too, of like knowing that we get to make the decisions and that it's not that we were forced into that decision. It's that we got to decide like, no, I feel really good. I made a good living. I'm okay.
Yeah, that's been my experience. Although I've now discovered taxes. I was more or less broke as a professor. Even when I was in a tenure track faculty line, I was getting paid real, peanuts. And it didn't impact me very much at all. And now I've realized it's not just the IRS, it's New York State, it's New York City, and you really got to know what you're doing and have some foresight to squirrel it away and pay estimated taxes every quarter. Or it's not the end of the world, but you got to really scramble to put together a big bill when tax time comes around, and it's generally best avoided.
I think that's one of the interesting things that so you went through business school as you alluded to before. And we have that big magic dashboard, the Excel sheet that people go through. And it's so funny because most people come in and say, okay, so we're going to do market research and figure out what other people are charging and navigate that to like set our fees. And we start people off in this very different way of setting a fee, of saying, okay, how many weeks a year can you really work? How many clients per year or per week? And then taking them through, like, what are your expenses, maybe your student loan expenses, or how much money do you need to take home? And then what are the taxes in your area? And that taxes tab always throws people off because they start to go, oh, I didn't really think about that. I didn't realize that there's these self-employment taxes that normally get absorbed, half of them by your employer when you're working as a W-2. Oh, I didn't check that like my county or my city taxes or all these other pieces. Sometimes we're taxed even on gross receipts, right? That like maybe it's 0.05%, maybe it's not a huge amount, but it does add up when you start making, six figures or multi six figures. Like those numbers do add up. And then at the end of that, the little Excel calculates and says, okay, here's the minimum you can charge to be able to pay these fees, to take home this amount and here's how much money to set aside for your taxes. And the amount that the taxes impacts that number always blows people's mind, right? They just go, that can't be the number. I just want to take home, maybe it's, depending on where they live, maybe it's 40,000, maybe it's $70,000 a year. Like it's a very modest amount of what they want to put in through the bank account. And then they realize, oh, wait, there's a lot going back to the government that we don't usually think about or see when we're just getting our W-2 paycheck, right? Same thing with our retirement, right? Or putting money away for being able to be on vacation or sick time or what have you, to like navigate that and understand how to like how to pay yourself in such a way that you're getting the same amount every week, or about the same amount every week, so that when you go off on vacation and sick time, it doesn't feel like, oh no, I'm not getting paid. It's like, no, I planned for vacation and sick time. Unless something goes really awry, I actually still have money in my bank account just to take the same draw or to pay myself in the same way. It's a very different skill set, and it takes most of us a little while, especially those of us with ADHD. It takes us a minute to get that in flow for sure.
Yeah, I'm nodding along as you're talking as though I've mastered all this stuff. I absolutely have not. I set up a PLLC, a professional limited liability corporation, and then learned, in quotation marks, that it would be beneficial to me as a taxpayer if I were to pay taxes as an S Corp. So I paid an accountant to perform that service and then learned something of the benefits and drawbacks of that setup. And along the way, got a new EIN for it and articles of incorporation, which had to get published. And all of this was news to me. I do remember using the spreadsheet you talked about, and it's a remarkable instrument. I do remember, though, several years ago, finding this number about what I would have to charge to get it to work. This, to me, strange thing about my experience in business school is I did not exploit to the fullest even half the resources that you and Kelly have put together over there, probably just a small fraction. For instance, I did not really make optimal use of those spreadsheets. And my website is very different from the very successful model that you've put together, which tends to produce websites in the second person that are addressed to prospective clients using the word you, that anticipate what the client is feeling based on your notion of your ideal client. It's a very effective model. My sense was, well, I treat women, I treat couples, I mostly treat men. And I feel like the second person might not resonate quite so much with them. And so that's not the approach that I use. And the site's serving me pretty well. The biggest thing I got from business school was the support that I could ask questions and people would answer within a reasonable amount of time, even if there wasn't a working session or a sprint going on at that moment. I could find resources that were geared to whatever my question was in the meanwhile, instead or in addition. And above all, the confidence. Here was a subculture of people who were doing essentially what I was trying to do, who maintained an atmosphere 24/7 of capability, competence, groundedness, role appropriate enthusiasm, that here are the guardrails, head in this general direction, don't be frightened, we're with you. All the freaking out that you're doing is natural to people whose kishkas, whose guts in Yiddish are oriented to, trying to help people, not to figure out what's 1.46% of 329.
What's so interesting, and I share this in particular because it used to be in academia, there is this statistic or this piece of research. Do you know what the most impactful piece of whether somebody will get a post-bachelor's degree, like a graduate or higher, like what is the like turning point, whether somebody will do that and be successful doing it?
No, what is it?
Whether they know someone who's done it.
Mm-hmm.
It's that community part of seeing someone who has done it before them. It doesn't necessarily have to be in their family. It can be a close friend. It can be someone in the community, but they need to know well another person who's gone down that path. And so I was thinking about that as you were saying, that place of being able to go when you're freaking out, when maybe you're feeling a little unsure, and go and look around at the community and go, oh, we're all doing it. Okay, this person's a little different part of the process. This person's over here. This person's a little behind me, with no judgment. Oh, they're ahead of me in this area. That's okay. And but we're all heart-centered humans, grounded humans who say we want to change the world in these little and big ways. And we want to do it in a way that's sustainable, where we can be fed and nourished and rest and really show up for our clients. So it's just so rad. This is such a great conversation, Jamey.
Yeah, I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
It's what you've just said is one of the reasons why I so admire people who are the first in their family to go to college. Both of my parents met in Brooklyn when my mother was 13, my dad was 15. They lived in the same neighborhood. Their parents, all four of them, were immigrants who spoke at least as much Yiddish as English and had no education to speak of. My grandfather made furniture polish in the bathtub and sold it for a living. And his business card said, Irving Hecht, polisher of fine furniture. That was the dignity he was able to hatch out of thin air. And my dad went to Brooklyn Technical High School and was told he would never graduate. He was the valedictorian in 1956 and got a PhD in physics and wound up writing the world's leading graduate textbook in optics, the branch of physics that deals with light. And my mother became a registered nurse, and they are now in their 80s, still together and very much in love and living in the house I grew up in Long Island.
Ah, so beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And it's kind of interesting too. I was thinking about my own, I have family that lived in New York, and my history is kind of funny because there's a lot of just the anti-Semitism kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
like my grandfather very much like won't tell a lot of the stories. So it's like you get like little pieces or what have you. And so he grew up in New York and only spoke German at the point that they came out to California and got put into like a Catholic school and like what that process looked like.
Sure.
And yet, right? Um, he went to school, he went to UC Davis and studied to be an engineer. And then he came out of it and decided, I think partially because he was so ADHD, it's like, I don't want to be behind a desk. I don't want to be inside. And so he bought a ranch and he delivered pies and then he delivered chips. And he became a beekeeper and like homesteaded and like did all these like wild, it's very like you look at it, you're like, this is a very ADHD man, right? Like whatever
Right.
the dynamics were. And then he used his engineering degree to, create his own honey spinner before you could do those things, with beekeeping and to like create his own processes, right? And
Mhm.
so it's this really, I really appreciate that piece that I got from them too, in terms of like hard work and just like navigating and making your own thing and figuring it out. It's really, really a lovely thing.
Yeah. That reminded me that the first time I heard of you was before I came across the business school. I was still at the relational center and I was getting close to licensure. I didn't have all my hours yet, but I was getting pretty close. And I remember asking someone, I wish I remember his name, but I don't, but he was a really nice guy. And he was one of the few other, more or less straight identifying white passing guys who was at this place. And he sort of took me, he didn't take me under his wing, but well, for an afternoon, he took me under his wing. I said, well, how am I ever going to figure out what I need to do in order to eventually start a business? And he went, remember this name, Miranda Palmer. Oh, all right, Miranda Palmer. Forgot all about it. And 2 years later, came across the business school. I went, oh, yeah, that's that person. And I balked at the price tag for a minute. And then I said, well, wait, this is going to give me what I need and I'll be able to avail myself of it, indefinitely into the future. It just makes perfect sense. Let me do it. And
And
I
here we
did, and it's made all the difference in the world.
I think it's an interesting piece. Like, and I know we're coming to the end of our thing because people only have so much attention span, but it's interesting how much we do invest in learning this craft and in the training of it, and how little of that is how to actually do the thing. And so I think it's normal that we feel like kind of frustrated or a little bit like a little angry that you could invest this much in a doctoral degree and a master's degree and certifications and all these things, and then so come out of it and go, okay, yeah, but like, how do I do this? Like in the real world, like, how do I actually get paid? Like, what does this actually look like? That is a little like really frustrating. And I think we definitely try to keep it under the cost of one grad school class, like one grad school course, and try to make it the best ROI you're going to get on anything. But it is like, I think we all sort of know intrinsically that this is material that should be integrated um, into graduate programs. Like I truly believe that, like that space that nobody in my graduate program has ever come back and said, hey, how much money did you make from this program? Are you employed? Are you doing the work? Like, why is that not part of the process? Like when you're going to apply to grad schools or trying to determine which grad school to go to find out what the employment rate, what is the average income of graduates there? Like, it's an interesting thing, right?
It really
Anyway.
is. It's sort of the mirror image of the way that you could get through an entire high school education, an entire bachelor's degree, really, in any subject, and never have an hour's instruction as to how to tolerate and learn from big feelings. and
Oh,
neither suppress them nor let them completely take you over. They just skip that part. And then psychotherapy is all about it. And they skip the part where you get the gears to mesh with other people, purchasing power, rendering it sustainable, valuing your work, not being completely obsessed with adding value so that you can't slow down and sit with it and let it cool off and so on. So you're adding a piece that's extremely important.
yeah. Wow. As we wrap up, what is one piece of advice you would give to anyone listening here that if you got to just be that voice, but besides, remember Miranda Palmer, besides that, like anybody else who's listening?
Be yourself. Look at the aspects of your identity, your experience, your voice, your creativity that you feel make you who you are, and ask yourself, given that that's who I am, how can I help and whom can I help? And follow where that leads. Trust in that, believe in that, extend compassion to you and to your prospective clients. And that's the star to steer by. Choose a niche, choose another niche if you want to, and be yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Jamey.
Thanks so much, Miranda. I had a great time.
Busy practice. This was such a lovely conversation. And for those of you who are listening, we hope that this inspires you. If you love this, rate us. If you hated it, rate us. Let us know how we did. And of course, we have free resources for you over at zynnyme.com to help you navigate this with a little more ease, including some free CEs. So until next time, y'all.
Thank you.